It's time to make sure those S3 buckets don't get publicly exposed and to do it in a way that hopefully doesn't piss everybody off. I am borderline speechless right now. So before we get in the lab, I just want to thank everyone. This is a full year of Cloud's Law. You have completed, I think, actually 53 labs, not 52 labs, just based on the timing. It's been an incredible journey. I am incredibly appreciative that thousands of you have been following me along and been coming on this learning exercise with me. So I'm looking forward to doing more. Quick note, we are going to be switching from here on out to every other week on the labs. We're getting into some more complicated topics. It takes me more time to set things up. You can read about all of this on the blog post. But I just want to personally thank all of you. I mean, not by name because we'd be here all day. Okay, with that out of the way, let's get into the lab. And, it's hard to express how many headlines are the direct result of somebody making an S3 bucket public. I mean, we're talking like epidemic levels and like, oh, I don't know, real world pandemic. Just when you think it's over, it's not really over. When the first string of public buckets hit the headlines, I'd scream, the headlines would scream, AWS S3 was hacked. And this is like the cloud equivalent of how every mobile vulnerability is an iPhone hack, because the more sensational the headline, the more ad views, I guess. I was one of those security folks screaming back into the void, S3 wasn't hacked. People had to deliberately make their buckets public. And you know what? That was kind of victim blaming. People weren't making their buckets public because they were stupid, but because it was simultaneously too easy to make them public while more granular sharing was too complex. There's so many ways to expose a bucket to the world that AWS themselves had to use automated reasoning, and don't call it AI, but it's AI, to know if a bucket is public or not for sure because of all the layers of the different policies and ACLs and such. Now, Amazon's improved immensely since those big early breaches. Aside from taking steps like trying to phase out ACLs completely, they started adding more alerts and features to reduce the chances that we would make buckets public by mistake. Then they brought the sledgehammer to the rock fight and released something called Block Public Access, or BPA. I love BPA. The idea started with S3 and it has since expanded to EBS snapshots and, like as of a week before I wrote this, VPCs. Block public access is a security invariant. They are high-level rules we can enforce across entire accounts and sometimes across our entire organization. You can't do org-level BPA yet, but we'll get to that. Block public access for S3 is really simple in terms of implementation, but many of you are working in existing environments, so it's important to understand the process of implementing BPA without breaking the hell out of things that actually require public access, like the CloudFormation templates I'm always sharing for these labs. Here's how block public access works. BPA can be set for an entire account, or you can set it on a per bucket basis. When you turn it on, you can set it to instantly block all public access or just enforce it for any new buckets or objects. You can set it to just block access via those ACLs, the access control list, or only via bucket policies and this other thing called access point policies, which we haven't covered those yet. Or you can turn them all on and block all public access. So what's the difference? Well, we did labs showing you the difference between ACLs and bucket policies. And if you follow mine and Amazon's advice, you'll never use ACLs anymore, but they're pretty commonly used. Setting BPA to disable them at the account level means that's locked down hard, and at least assuming you don't give anyone the IAM permissions to turn BPA off. Bucket policies are more granular and you might want to allow them for sharing. But in my experience, most of the time you turn BPA on for one, you probably want it on for all of those access methods. Now, what's that little bit I mentioned about pissing people off? BPA is powerful, and for some percentage of security professionals, our instinct is just to lock everything down. The problem is that S3 is used all the time to share things publicly for totally legit purposes. It can host images, templates like the ones I've been using, and even work like a web server. My day job over at Firemon, our cloud defense product, it's a massive SaaS platform that's literally just a single page application hosted in an S3 bucket that works as the web server. And we have an API gateway as well. We don't have a web server. And if I turned BPA on in that environment, it would be bad, very bad, and we wouldn't have any customers anymore. So here's my recommended process, and a little bit mostly in order, but sometimes you might need to bounce these things around if you're in a more complicated environment. So I do like to start in existing environments with Access Analyzer or a cloud security posture management tool that will identify any existing public buckets. Keep in mind, Access Analyzer may be a little bit better than even the best of the CPM tools just because of how that works with that automated reasoning piece. Then I hunt down whoever owns those buckets. And that can be really hard sometimes, but and time consuming. But you want to find out if those buckets should exist, and if so, if they do comply with corporate policies. Then I'm going to write a service control policy that prevents disabling BPA and apply to every OU except maybe my exceptions OU and workloads prod. That's going to vary a little bit depending on what your organizational units are. Like you might not use that for your M&A and onboarding. But remember, all we're doing is we're saying you can't turn BPA off if it's already turned on. So it's not actually turning it on automatically anywhere else. It's just preventing anybody from turning it off. Then we can use our account factory. And that's the thing we haven't gotten to yet, but that's how you build new accounts with automation and use that to enable block public access by default on all new accounts. Now, I don't recommend using those resource control policies exclusively and ignoring block public access, again, because of all the effectiveness within BPA and also RCPs. They've only been around for a couple of weeks as I'm recording this, so we need to learn a little bit more about how effective those are at scale. Now, your production OU, your prod OU in your workloads is probably going to be a little bit different because you might need some public access there for some of those buckets. Now, dev and non-prod, I get really nervous when those allow public access, which is why I really like to hammer those down pretty early. But for prod, I do recommend making the decision to turn it on a per account and a per bucket level. You'll have some production applications that should never have public buckets. You might have others where you might have a public bucket like ours, which is serving as a web server, and then other buckets where you want to turn BPA on to make sure those buckets and those objects can never be public. And that's kind of what we're going to learn about when we get hands-on in this lab. Now, for existing accounts that probably shouldn't have public buckets, you can turn BPA on with the settings so that only applies to new buckets or objects. So that's going to keep the problem from getting any worse, but the existing ones will still be publicly accessible, but then you kind of have to evaluate those on a one-to-one basis to figure out if those should be public or not and then make any changes. Now, if I go into a large environment with a lot of existing stuff, this is complicated. And I'll probably use automation to sweep through and fix things as best I can. Maybe a CloudFormation stack set or some code I'm going to write myself. But for us, for today, I want you to focus on a few key things and learn how block public access works. Primarily the difference between the account level, the bucket level, the block everything, and then the block only new things. Let's get into our lab. We're going to go into our workload account and we're going to set block public access at a bucket level. We're going to operate it differently on two of our different buckets. So you get to see the difference between the block everything and the block new and how that works. All right. So with that, let's go back to our sign-in portal like we've been doing every week. From my sign-in portal, I'm going to go to test account 1 and I'm going to go to administrator access. From here, we'll go into S3 because, block public access lives in S3, and I don't know why I said that. Okay, so we have two buckets here, and I want you to quickly review block public access settings for the entire account. If I click on that and I make these changes, that's going to lock the entire account down. And we're not going to want to do that today. I'm actually going to show you that in a minute in one of our other accounts, which is a different part of the lab. Let's go back over to the buckets. And I'm going to pick these pretty arbitrarily. So I'm going to go for the first one, which is the public bucket policy. Now you'll notice we do have Access Analyzer on, but you don't see the results here, even though we saw that it was public. So let me go ahead and I'm going to actually open this in a new tab just to show you. And the reason we don't have it because it's not enabled in this account, we're doing it at the organization level. So the people that are working within the account, this aren't going to be able to see it because it has to be turned on for the region and the analyzer has to be at the account level to see it on this screen. By the time you see this lab, this user interface may change, and they used to show if it was public or not. They're not currently doing that. I actually know why, and it's not something I'm allowed to talk about. Okay, going back into block public access, we'll pick the first one, which is the bucket policy version of it, and I'll click on that bucket policy. And for this one, we want to go ahead and go to permissions, block public access. Let's edit the settings. And what we're going to do is not use the for new access, but we're going to do the for any access. We're going to disable ACLs, not that we were using them here, and we're going to block public and cross account access to buckets and objects through any public bucket or access point policies. So this is going to completely lock this bucket down, even though we've made it public, and you saw that in Access Analyzer. Click Save Changes. And then we have to confirm. And that's nice that they do this because look at this warning. It will affect this bucket and all objects and may result in some things becoming public. Yeah, we're turning it on. I don't know why they're doing it. That's a warning that I guess if you turn it off. So you can see that we actually have individual settings. And if I click that down arrow, you can see that any access control list and any public buckets are disabled. All right. Let's go back to our buckets and we'll go to our second bucket here. And we're going to modify this one a little bit differently. Let's go to permissions and we don't have any objects in here. So this is almost a little bit of a, kind of a head fake, but you can see nothing is turned on. So we'll click edit. We're going to turn this on only for new ACLs, which shouldn't happen. So that means this will still be listed as public because the bucket is still public and through new bucket or access policies. So this setting says, well, if this is already public, the bucket and the objects in the bucket, and that's the key phrase here. So let me zoom in on that. The objects in the bucket, whoops, when I click that, it turned it off, that any new ones will be private, but any of the existing ones are still going to be public. And this is valuable because it can help you fix things to make changes. Here's an example how you might want to do this. You could create a public bucket. You could actually put in your object, which is your website, and that's going to be your web pages that are in there, static, hosted, make those public. Then you turn on the nothing new can be public in there. That'll lock it down so only the existing known things can be public. This can create problems as you do updates because if you add new objects in, of course, when you're doing updates, those won't be able to be shown. But again, Amazon's giving us the flexibility, and I'm showing you both ways to do it. All right, so we go back in, let's go ahead and we'll save changes and we are going to confirm. Now, I want you to close this window, but if we go back to the buckets here, you can see we've modified both of these. And I'm not sure how well this next part's going to work in the video timing wise, but let's close this account out. Let's go to our security audit account. And from our security audit account, we'll go in with administrator access because we're not just going to look at some results here. I actually want to go into S3 and look, this is an account that probably should never have public buckets, right? Because this is where we keep all of our security stuff. It's super secret. So click the three arrows, go to block public access for the account, hit edit, and we're going to just turn off all public access. Nothing new, nothing existing. Now it's easy to do because we don't have any S3 buckets, so we're not going to be breaking anything. And I know that because I just clicked on S3 and I saw I didn't have any buckets, and we'll save changes. And I'm going to confirm this. And so now we have set this also at the entire account level. So everything is safe and it's protected. And if you heard my email, and maybe not because I've got a nice microphone here, but I'm already getting emails that block public access settings have been changed, which is kind of cool. So that shows that our security hub is working. Let's switch gears and let's go into Access Analyzer. And we'll see if these changes got picked up. And I'm doing this live on video, so I've got no idea if this is going to work. Let's go to our external access and look at this. So if you remember last time, we had two buckets listed here with external access. Now we only have this one. Why do we see this difference? Because by turning on block public access for all of the existing ones on our bucket policy, the bucket that we had that was designated as our bucket policy the bucket because it had that BP in there, that instantly stopped any public sharing and that bucket policy no longer is effective and can do anything. Now, by turning on block public access for anything new, it does mean that the existing things in that existing bucket that we open up via our ACLs can potentially still be public. So that is still an exposure. So this is great. We get near instant results from Access Analyzer. We can see the differences between our buckets. And now you should have a better sense of how block public access works. Remember, you can set it for an entire account, and you can do it for everything existing in the account or just for new things. And we can block public access on a per bucket level, which might be more of what you're going to use in like production environments where sometimes that's being used, where I just like to block everything at the account level, like we did for our security audit account, for accounts where we should never be allowed to have public buckets. All right. I want to thank you guys again. It is, I'm recording this, it's 8 p.m. Family's out of the house. Tuesday night before the Thanksgiving holiday. I know I generally try not to do dates and times and stuff when I'm doing these videos because I want these labs to last, but it's been a pretty special moment for me to get through this entire year. Still got a lot of editing to do, but I'm really excited, and I want to thank you for just coming on this experiment with me. So with that, thanks, and have a great week. And to be honest, it might be 2 weeks.